All right, guys, we are back in my garage for another video, and today we are finally going to be solving my fuel starvation issue once and for all using the BimmerWorld kit. And for those of you that don't know, the BimmerWorld kit is basically a solution for fuel starvation that some people run into on the track. Basically, fuel starvation happens when you're usually going around a big right-hand sweeper, pulling a lot of G's, and what that does is it causes all the fuel in your fuel tank to slosh over to the left side. And because your fuel pump is on the right side of the fuel tank, it moves the fuel away from the primary source of fuel for your engine. And so when you go down a big straight, unfortunately, you can run into fuel cut and starve the engine of fuel. So this solution will add an additional fuel pump to the left side of the fuel tank that is actively pumping fuel over to the right side, so you always have fuel right by your fuel pump where you need it. Now, keep in mind, I want to be very clear here. This is not something that everybody needs in order to drive on track. I didn't have any issues when I was running street tires. I didn't have any issues when I was running stock turbo. This didn't happen until I started getting faster as a driver, upgraded my turbo, and basically increased the fuel demand of the car. So I am curious if anybody else out there ran into fuel starvation. Let me know what your car is, maybe a couple key things about your setup, and what track created that perfect combination where fuel starvation happened for you. But for me, it was really common at Putnam Park because there's that big right-hand turn through turn 9 and 10 right before the front straight, and after about maybe 10 or 15 miles an hour, right when I would shift, I would hit fuel cut, and that was happening around a half tank. So this BimmerWorld kit should hopefully allow me to run less fuel, which will not only extend your session and allow you to drive for longer, but will also allow you to run less weight on track, which should hopefully translate to faster times. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at the kit, see what comes with it from BimmerWorld, and then I'll show you guys how to install it on my 340i. All right, so we've got the package here from BimmerWorld. Let's go ahead and open it up. This is my first time looking at it as well, so we're just gonna kind of see what's inside. So this is the main kit. Actually, it looks like pretty much everything is in here. So it's got the fuel pump and the hose and all that stuff. It does come with some instructions, so that's good. It's advertised for F80, but it should fit F20, F30 as well. And we've got some more wiring, so we'll make that work. And then, of course, some energy boost to keep us motivated. So let's go ahead and cut this open. All right, so as you can see, it comes with a Deutschwerks pump. I don't know what size it is. It just says lift pump, Deutschwerks micro. So we'll look and see what the flow rate is on this maybe after this, but this is what's going to drop in on the right side of the tank, or on the left side of the tank, like behind the driver's seat. And then this hose is going to run all the way over to the fuel pump so it can pump fuel directly into the basket. And then we've got these two wires. One is a ground, one is power. And what I'm thinking, I mean, the way that this is designed is you're supposed to run this to like a ground on the chassis and then a fuse. But I think I can connect this to my reflex and have it only pump when I'm full throttle making boost. So I don't know, you can do either one. I'll see when I get to the car which one I feel like. But if you run this to constant power, it's always going to be running when the car is on. And I don't know if I necessarily want that. So we'll see. And it also comes with these connectors. So I think this is the part that goes onto your fuel pump hat. So we'll drill and add this to the fuel pump to run the wires through. And then we've got these connectors to make it all work. And then I guess these are just additional leads to run it out to the chassis. So yeah, I think overall this should be pretty straightforward. Now that I've done reflex and stuff, nothing really seems too intimidating anymore. It should be a lot easier with the arcade pump. If you've already got a secondary fuel pump, then this will add a lot of complexity, but either way, it should work. So yeah, let's go ahead and head over to the car and get this installed. All right, so at this point, we have run down the gas to below a quarter tank, down to at least 50 miles to empty if you can. And we've disconnected the battery, so no fuel should spray out unexpectedly. And now we can start actually working on the fuel pump area. So as always, it's right underneath the rear seat, really easy to access. We're gonna pull up on the front of the bench to unclip it. And then you might need to push the actual seatbelt buckles into these holes, and everything should just pull straight out. Then we're going to pull back this sound deadening, and now we can get to the access panel. So you're going to use a 10mm socket to remove the 5 nuts holding the access cover in place. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then the cover just comes off. Then we're going to unplug this. And depending on how long the car has been sitting, we're going to disconnect this fuel line, but fuel may spray out. So you'll want like a microfiber towel or some shop rags or something to prevent the fuel from, making too much of a mess. So first we'll pry off this white clip. I just remove it completely because I don't know why when it's just kind of pushed back, it doesn't really work for me. So remove the white clip, and then there's like a button right here that you squeeze and pull to get this hose off. So get your rag ready, push in the button, and pull it off. Not too bad. But the car has been sitting overnight, so I like to just make sure we get all the pressure removed before messing with the fuel system. Clean that up a little bit. Now for years, I have removed this retaining ring with just like a hammer and a screwdriver. You put the screwdriver on one corner and hammer it to kind of turn it. But eventually, I just went ahead and got the tool. So we're going to use the tool today. It's much, much easier. It just kind of snaps in like this. All right, grab my breaker bar and twist. And it pops off. And now the fuel pump should be free. And we look in here, not a whole lot of fuel, which is exactly what I wanted. Again, just running down the fuel tank makes it a lot easier, because if this is full, as soon as this pops up, some fuel will actually start spilling out. It literally gets that filled to the top in this fuel tank. Now at this point, I think I've posted like 3 low pressure fuel pump DIYs on my channel. So if you've seen one, you obviously know this process, but for anybody that's new, it's pretty straightforward. First thing is to fish out the pump. It usually helps to kind of take it at an angle a little bit. Just watch all the hoses and make sure nothing is getting stuck on any corners or anything. Grab an extra rag too, just to make sure you don't spill too much fuel, because some will be in the bucket as you're pulling it out. So you kind of just want to watch that. I don't know why these always like to come apart on me as I'm pulling them out. Maybe I'm being too rough. But there you can see all the hoses. The basket has a bunch of gas in it. So again, just be careful. And then right here, you've got the passive transfer that we're going to be upgrading. So just rotate it like that. And then there's a little button on this side. You press the button, pull on the hose, and it should come off. There we go. And then I'm just going to try to pour as much fuel back into the tank as possible so I don't make a mess. I think this is the cleanest fuel pump removal I've had so far. So 4th time's the charm, I guess. Now the transfer hose does have a plug up here, so you can see the wire going from the hose that's plugging into the top hat. So you'll just need to unplug that. There's a little tab that you squeeze, and then you can pull it out. Now, hopefully you guys won't go swimming here. I've got a death grip on my phone, but I do want to show you a little closer of what we're doing. So here you can see this is the siphon hose that is passively sucking fuel over, but the hose goes all the way over
to the other side of the tank. So you can kind of see here where that bridge is, that gap is going over and down to another pocket of fuel on the left side of the tank. So what we're going to do, instead of just having this hose that's, you know, passively sucking, we're going to put that pump all the way over there so that it's actively pumping fuel to this side of the tank. And that way we'll make sure we always have fuel around the fuel pump. So obviously with that in mind, this process isn't going to be very easy to show on camera, but I mean, I think you kind of get the idea. The concept is pretty straightforward, but visually it's not too appealing. So I'll try to show you guys what I can, but here's how it's gonna go. So we've got the transfer hose down here. And what we're gonna do is take the pump and push the hose and the wire through this zip tie. All right, everything else can stay back. They say to snug this up a little bit so that the fuel pump isn't moving around a lot. I'm assuming you'll hear it like knocking around in the back of the car during high-speed turns, but you also want it loose enough to where it can still slide freely on this hose as you try to fish it over. So I don't want to be too aggressive with it, especially because it'll probably be coming off at some point. So I just kind of tightened it maybe halfway, and then you're going to start fishing it over. So let's see how far we get. All right, so it's on the hose and I can feel it sliding over. It feels like there are other zip ties on the hose as well that you kind of have to manage. So you may need to rotate the pump around it a little bit to get it to keep sliding. So definitely make sure, you know, you don't make that zip tie too tight. That loop needs room for it to wiggle around. I think it's there. Yeah, it sounds like it's there. So I can hear it kind of going up and down. I know there's probably a lot of noise that you're hearing, but I can like pull on it and it drops back down. So I can hear it hitting the bottom of the fuel tank on that side. So there's still plenty of hose and stuff left over. I'm assuming, you know, of course they give you extra to make sure you have plenty of line to get it over there without it being too short and dropping in the tank or whatever. But yeah, pretty straightforward, like I said. I think if I had a scope or camera or something that I could wiggle over there, I'd probably try to do that just for added confirmation. But, you know, you can tell it basically is like weighted now. It's hanging on the other side of the tank and it's not moving anymore, even if I push the hose. So should be good. All right, so we're back after a quick trip to the swimming pool, and now we've got to drill out the top of this top hat. What I've seen on the BimmerWorld instructions is they drill basically right here, right underneath this dummy connector, I guess. So they drill a hole right here, and that's where they put the bulkhead fitting. Now the challenge is this hole is supposed to be 11/16, and I double checked and realized I don't have an 11/16 drill bit. So my kit only goes up to a 1/2 inch. And because of that, I had to go get this stepped drill bit. So if you guys don't have an 11/16 like mine, apparently it doesn't exist. Everything I've seen individually goes from like 5/8 up to a 3/4 inch. So just get a stepped drill bit, and it includes an 11/16 spot. So this is what we're going to use. I'll start off by drilling a quick pilot hole just to get everything centered, and then we'll open it up with the stepped bit. This is hectic, man, because it's going in here really fast. I just want to make sure I don't open this up too much. Let's get all these plastic shavings and stuff out of the way. And I forgot they mentioned that this has like these pieces on here that you might want to trim. So let's go ahead and try to do that too. So they say you can just use a Dremel, but I'm just gonna try to snip these off with these. All right, and then this is the bulkhead fitting, so you can see it kind of has an O-ring on it. So you're going to push it through the top and then tighten this nut on the bottom. So we'll fit it through this hole. So it's a little bit close to this connector, so probably if you want to do it properly, space it out a little closer to the edge so it's not so tight. This is just barely on there, but we should still be able to tighten it down from the back side. Like I said, use this nut and then we'll tighten it down. All right, so it's on there good. Like I said, it's pretty much kissing that dummy plug, but we got it on. All right, so now we have everything reassembled and it's time to start putting the last couple pieces together before we can put the pump in the tank. And really, it's just these two. So the first thing I want to do is run these two wires up through the bulk fitting. So you'll push them through the bottom and one should go through each of the holes. So just take your time to kind of line it all up. Yeah, you need a little bit of patience for this part. Probably easier if I would just flip it over, but I like to keep things interesting. So there's one. And actually it did say don't tighten this too tight because it crimps the hole that they go through. So once I feed the connector through as much as it'll come, I just kind of come in here with these really small screwdrivers, try to squeeze on something that's not too important, and then pull it the rest of the way. I'm gonna try to pull this sleeve through too, just to make sure I know which one's which. And then, yeah, at this point, just tighten everything down so it's super secure. All right, and then the last piece for this, of course, is the actual fuel hose. So what BimmerWorld recommends is routing it behind the fuel pump so that it doesn't get in the way of the actual level sensor, because if it's over here and this can't, you know, go up and down freely, it could potentially cause your fuel level to read inaccurately, and of course we don't want that. So go ahead and route it kind of around the back like this, and then it's going to come down in this area by the fuel pump, kind of point it down in the basket. I'm going to kind of tuck it in a little bit, and then they recommend just using a zip tie to kind of hold it in place. So I'm just going to go right here. Nothing too fancy. Make sure it's going in the basket. And boom. I think we're good. So you can do one or two, you know, do another one just to be redundant. But again, just make sure the line goes behind the fuel pump so it won't get in the way of the level sensor. All right, and then we're going to reconnect the pieces for the OEM transfer pump. So that includes this plug that plugs in back here. Get that clipped in. And then the actual transfer pump that we will click in. There we go. And it should rotate itself back into its locking position as you feed it in. So we'll just push this down there, make sure all the hoses and everything get tucked in. This piece always wants to come off on me. I don't know why, but for those that don't know how it works, you basically feed it in from the bottom. So there's a hole right here. We're gonna come in from the bottom and slide it all the way up, and then put this spring on top like so, and then it clips into this little hole right here, and it stays pretty good until you start fighting with it, and then it wants to run free. So we'll just try again. Again, just watching all the fuel lines and everything as you feed it in. Alright, so we got everything in. Fuel line is good. I'm still going to try to move it a little more out of the way because it's going around the back of the pump, but it kind of is wrapping around the front more than I like. And I just don't want it to get in the way of the float. So again, I know it's hard to see on camera, but just use your judgment, right? Look in the hole, make sure everything has appropriate clearance and space to move it around so that you have enough room for all the hoses and everything, but nothing's interfering with a component that shouldn't be. Now, once you have all of that seated, we're going to go ahead and retighten the ring that holds all of this in place. There we go. And then reconnect your fuel line. And then we'll plug this back in. Now, we still need to actually make the rest of this harness. And so the BimmerWorld kit comes with 2 plugs as well as the extra wires, but they have to push through this hole. I've already made a hole because I used to have a secondary fuel pump in here that required extra wiring anyway. But if you don't have this hole, basically you'll need to punch through like a small screwdriver or something to make an additional hole through this grommet. So you can kind of see where mine is there. And I'm gonna push my wires through. And kind of as they mentioned in the manual, this isn't the easiest thing to do because, you know, the wires don't have a whole lot of, I guess, structure to them, but kind of do your best to push it through the hole that you made and just take your time with it. But as you can see, I already have a hole, so mine goes through pretty easily. So we'll do that with both wires. There we go. And now we get to make our connectors. So they come with these 2 plugs as well as 4 grommets to kind of seal everything off. They do give guidance on like which side should be facing which way, but the main thing is just to make sure that when you plug it in, both grounds touch off and both positive wires touch off. So again, just pay attention and do what you need to do there. Otherwise, I don't really think it's a big deal if it matches perfectly to their guide. They just give you, you know, clear instructions so that if you are guessing and not really sure what you're doing, it kind of eliminates the guesswork. So first thing is to push the grommets onto the wires. Put the fat end on first so that the thin end is facing the tip, and it should go all the way past the connector onto the wire itself, like so. All right, again, we're just going to do this the way that BimmerWorld says, but ultimately it shouldn't matter as long as they both match up. But you can see there are letters on here. So one side says A, one side says B. And so for the female connector, you're going to put the ground into B, push it in until it clicks in place, and then put the power into A. Again, push it in until it clicks in place. Hopefully. Why you no clicky? I think my wings got bent in a little bit, so we'll open those up just to make sure it stays clipped in place. There we go. And then we'll push the grommets in to make it nice and sealed off. And then for the male connector, we're going to do the same thing. So put the ground into B, and then power into A. And then again, push your grommets all the way in to make sure it's nice and sealed off. And then we plug these two together. . Ta-da! Like magic. And again, just make sure ground is going to ground and power is going to power. If not, you can always use a de-pinning tool to undo it and redo your pins. And then boom, we'll pull this back through just because we don't need that much slack. And reinstall our fuel pump. Maybe. There we go. Reinstall our fuel pump cover. All right, so now the last little bit is just to run the power and ground wire from the fuel pump to make sure it has power. So we'll lower this side of the seat and pop this top part out. And for the ground, they actually recommend using this ground that's right here. So we're gonna go ahead and tap into that. All right, and so for this one, we'll run the black wire kind of up and around to mount it on here and tighten it back on. And then for the power wire, we're gonna run it back here. And this is where I'm a little bit conflicted. So just being transparent, I think I mentioned at the beginning, I want to run this to my motive reflex so that I am able to actually run this only in boost. So I can leave the fuel pump always connected and everything will work normally for normal driving. But whenever I'm full throttle, it'll start pumping fuel over to the other side of the tank. But it sounds like that might not be good enough. And also because of the way that this is designed, it's actually designed to clip in from the back of the fuse box. I originally thought that this was gonna be like a add a fuse kind of tap that goes into the top of the fuse box. So because of how this is designed, I'm gonna go ahead and leave it how it is and just install it the way that BimmerWorld designed it. Feel free to try running it with a motive reflex, and maybe you can set it up for only map 2 to run your secondary trigger or whatever, and then use a relay with this to actually only activate it in the right conditions. But for now, we're going to go ahead and install it to run all the time with the fuse running, and then anytime I don't want it running, I'll just disconnect that fuse, and that way the pump won't run unless I'm at the track. I'm actually gonna run it this way in front of the seat belt, but kind of under the seat. So we'll pull it up right here, give it some slack just so, you know, it's not getting snagged by anything once the seat is reinstalled. And then it's gonna install under this trim, and let's take a look at where it's going in the trunk. So in order to access the fuse box in your trunk, you're gonna lift up this lower panel, lift it up from the back, and then just pull, and you can see the actual fuse box. And as you can tell, I've already accessed this one in the past because I've got my Blackview dash camera running to here. So this is already got a little bit of stuff going on. But what we're going to do is remove the fuse box and tap into it from the back. So we need to disconnect this nut on this side first, and then we can lift it up and see the back. So what's actually going on here is we've got all these fuses on the left. So after removing this nut, we can lift up the fuse box, slide it to the left, and flip it over and see that a bunch of these fuses don't actually have a power connector going to them. So what they basically recommend is picking one of these to tap into, and that way it will only power on when the car is turned on. So we'll go ahead and pick one of these, maybe this one, and that way we always have a fuse that we can just pop out if we don't want the fuel pump to run right at that time. Now, I actually just decided to double check, and I'm glad I did because, you know, like I said, I saw in the materials that pretty much all those fuses go to nothing, but also a bunch of them that don't go to anything always have power. So as long as the battery's connected, the pump would be running. So I connected the battery to the car temporarily just to check the fuses and see which one was actually switched. So that way the pump would only run if the car is on. That's important to me. So what ended up working is the very last 5 amp fuse down here at the back. So we're gonna flip this over and it should be
this very last connector down here. This connector is directional because you can kind of see if a fuse were to slide in there, it would only go in one direction, right? So just make sure you put it in the right way. So like looking at the fuses from this direction, the flat should be facing where the fuse can actually fit in there. So just keep that in mind. So we're gonna take the wire for the kit and push it in right here. All right, I guess I just had to hit it with my purse. I had to push it in there really hard, really far. I used this small flathead screwdriver to push on the actual connector and try to push it all the way in, but now it's in there solid. So we're good to go. We'll reattach everything and then we'll do a quick test to make sure it's all working. All right, so we're in the car, everything's buttoned back up and we don't hear the pump running. So that is a good sign. Now let's go ahead and see if it turns on with the start stop button. So you can hear it running, pumping a lot of fuel. So that is a good sign. So what we'll do is just turn off the pump. Oops. There we go. So have to make sure we open the door to shut it off. But for now, we'll just pop the fuse and pull that out for regular street driving. And then I'll put the fuse back in when I'm on track to make sure I avoid fuel starvation. And that's it. So as you can see, the overall idea for the install is pretty straightforward. It does require some tight hands in a couple scenarios, but overall it was a pretty easy install and I'm really excited to test this out. As you guys know, we don't just slap parts on the car here. We will be going back to the track in about 3 weeks from the time of filming this video to test it out and see how well it works. So of course I'll be sharing the results and some feedback with you guys at that point. Stay tuned for more on that. But otherwise, I think that's it for this video. So thank you guys for watching and I hope this helps. And if you have any other questions or comments, leave them down below.